Hello and welcome to the Automate Office Work show. I'm your host, Justin Turman. I am an ex corporate lawyer. I worked for 10 years as a corporate lawyer, and I automated most of my work using the tools that we're going to go over today using the Microsoft environment. And I'm happy to have everyone here ready to participate. Today, we are going to go just for the first 15 minutes. We're going to go over some of the basic tools of how you get started automating inside the Microsoft environment. And then if we have any guests, we could go to question and answer. We can help with specific situations. If there are no questions or from the audience today, then we could just go over maybe some basic situations that I've had in my own work for another 15 minutes. So we're going to keep this to just a half hour. I am going to try to do a live stream like this on LinkedIn every Friday. It's 4 p.m. Amsterdam time, which is Central Europe time, which is usually 6 hours after US Eastern time. This week, because we changed clocks in Europe already and in the US they have not, we're actually 1 hour closer. So today it's 11 a.m. Eastern time, but in the future it should be, I believe, 10 a.m. Eastern time in New York. All right, so I'm Justin. I am your host, and I started a consulting company. I left my work as a lawyer. I now work in my own company called automateofficework.com. You can find me there. You can find my services. And all right, let's get into Microsoft. Um, the first tool that you need to know about when automating inside of Microsoft Office, it's called Power Automate, and you can find it at powerautomate.com. And if your company already has Microsoft licenses, you have a license to use this tool as well. It looks like it's automatically redirecting me to make.powerautomate.com. If it takes you to the homepage, you might have to sign in. Uh, you'll notice at the very first that you have a left panel for navigating on the left side. And you see you can create an automation. You've got some templates you can learn. You've got a link to My Flows, which is a list of your automations that if you already have them. I'm going to click on Create, this plus Create, and you see there are about, looks like 6 different types of automations you can create. Okay, this might be a little overwhelming. You are going to stay probably in the verse 3 kinds of automations at first. You've got automated cloud flow, instant cloud flow, and a scheduled cloud flow. Okay, and I usually stay in 1 and 3. Okay, the scheduled cloud flow is an automation that you want to run on a regular basis. Maybe it's every day or every Monday morning or the first day of the month, something like that. And so that is your trigger, is going to be time. Okay. The first one, automated cloud flow. These are other kinds of triggers. There's a whole list of them. I'm going to click on it. And you've got this pop-up first that shows you the most popular triggers. You can see like the very first one, it's suggesting when a new response is submitted in Microsoft Forms, what would you like to do with that data? Yeah, maybe you would like to just have it do its normal thing of creating like an Excel spreadsheet that you go look at. But you might have some other things you want to do with this data, like send it to SharePoint, a list. You might want to email somebody the responses to this. There's another trigger here when an item is created on SharePoint. And this is really useful. If your users are doing things inside of SharePoint, maybe you give them access to create an item on a list. Maybe instead of your requesters going and filling out a form, maybe you send them to SharePoint, to a list, and you have them create a list item with all the details there. So you can capture this as a trigger with this trigger. Okay. And there's some more. There are so many. There are things like when an email is received in your Outlook, when events are created, calendar. There's a huge number of these things. Usually I just click on skip because I want to see like the full list of all these triggers. Okay, so now I'm here at the design portion in Power Automate. And the very first thing you have to do is add a trigger. This is your very first step, and it is the trigger. It it forces the automation to start running. So I click on add a trigger, and now I've got quite a bit bigger list of all of these triggers that are available. Okay. A lot of these are just standard inside of Power Automate. Some of them, they have the word premium next to them, and that means that you have to pay an extra license fee. That might be to Microsoft for more powerful tools. A lot of AI kinds of tools are premium, and also there are these triggers. They're called connectors when they connect to like an entire platform. So, like you might have a connector to Gmail, or a connector to SAP or Workday or to Adobe Sign. And some of these are free, but also many of them are also premium. You need to have a license, for example, to Adobe Sign to be able to use that connector. Okay, so find your trigger, and I guess yeah. I'm not going to go through any examples here. I guess we don't have enough time in these 15 minutes. But you can find your trigger. Once you have a trigger, like let's do a mail. Oh, there were no operations found for mail. Let's do email. When an email arrives, okay, you have to sign in. Like if it's going to be monitoring somebody's email, you need to sign in with that person who controls that email. You just put in your Microsoft credentials. Okay, I'm typing in. Oh, and it's not fine. Maybe I did a mistake. But once you have that, you click on this plus sign underneath the trigger, and then you add additional steps. And you can chain these steps along. You can do operations, different functions on the data, and you can pass it to something else and do a further calculation. Maybe you can send your data to like a Word document. You convert it to PDF. You then send it to to SharePoint and to OneDrive, and perhaps you send an email. So you can do very complex things with this. It's a very powerful tool that connects everything. Okay. All right. So, and the next tool that I use is actually SharePoint itself. Okay. And I'm going to show you an example of this. Okay. So if I go to, let's say, legal/bios, and then have my email, Justin Turman. Okay, so I created a system that holds biographies of everybody in my department. So it's really, really fun. It's a great way to connect with people. And I used a little bit of Power Automate here, but most of this is on the SharePoint side. Okay, I'm going to show you, go to sitecontents.com, or site contents of my SharePoint. If I create a new page in SharePoint, there is a web part that used to be standard in SharePoint. It's called Modern Script Editor. And if you add that to your page, you've got a new box here, and there's a button that says Edit Snippet. If I click on Edit Snippet, it gives me a box where I can type code. I can type any HTML and JavaScript that I want. Okay, this is really powerful. You can create whatever customized page you want. There are then it's called an API, an application programming interface. You can write code that interacts with any data on SharePoint, which is all those lists, all those trees of folders with files. You can get the data, you can read it, you can modify the data, you can update files, you can create new files and folders, you can do everything. So you don't have to just be dependent on the regular interface of SharePoint. You can create any customized interface that you want for your users. And then, and then um, I actually didn't like this kind of interface just because it was still too SharePointy for me. And you notice that on my bios page, this is a SharePoint page, by the way, but you don't see any SharePoint banner. There's no left navigation. All of that is gone. And that's because I figured out how to get my code into SharePoint, without all the other SharePoint stuff. So I'm going to show you how I did this. I go to my site contents. So I created a new document library and I called it bios. So that creates a folder here called bios. And then we go into this folder, bios, and I placed a file here called default.aspx. Okay. And this is the default page that opens. It's an HTML page. And when it's blank, and your user goes to the BIOS folder, the user sees the contents of default.aspx, which when it's blank, the user sees a completely blank white page. And you are then free to just start coding anything that you want on there. It can connect to the SharePoint using the SharePoint API. It uses the credentials of the user who is logged in. Okay, that's another thing to say about Power Automate. When you make a flow, it's very powerful and it uses the credentials of not the person who is logged in, if they're the ones triggering a flow, but it uses the credentials of the author of the flow. So this is extremely powerful. There is a trigger in Power Automate that is when someone goes to a URL. Okay, this creates a URL, and someone can actually go to that URL and then see uh, it triggers all the data going around, and you can actually have it result at the very end. You can tell it to push some kind of contents of a web page back to the user, so you can actually create a web page using Power Automate. But yeah, I wouldn't recommend that. I would recommend actually using SharePoint, since SharePoint is a system with web pages, and I would recommend that you put a lot of your logic and your code can actually just go in an HTML file here called default.aspx. Okay, I recommend doing it this way because it's actually faster than Power Automate. Power Automate, yes, it's amazing, but it's also slow, especially when you have very complex flows. And Microsoft can throttle how much you can use. If you're using too much memory in their system, they can slow it down, it can stop working, it just times out. So in my experience, it's much better to take long, complex things and put it onto SharePoint. And then you send your user to a customized interface. So instead of them doing something on a list inside the regular SharePoint interface, which the interface people complain about, right? They say that it's not very friendly. So I would make a really nice interface for them. And then whatever buttons they have to do, you place them with intention, and then you can program the button. You can make it so that when they click the button, it triggers perhaps that new URL that you created in Power Automate. Okay, this is a by the way, this action that I'm talking about, a trigger with calling a URL. It is a premium feature now. It used to not be. So yes, I was all in on Power Automate using that feature until they made it premium. And I had to figure out other ways around it that you don't have to call a URL. You can use the other triggers for the most part. Okay, so I'm going to show you this default.aspx. If I click on it, it opens up my home page for my BIOS platform. But if I instead go and we say download, there we go. I have this file that I've downloaded and I open it here in my editor, and you can see all of the HTML. This is HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And you can create any kind of tool that you want for automating. Very, very powerful. Okay, I'm going to close this. Um, I'm wondering if we had an audience, what would the questions be? Aha, I see we have a comment. Oh no, screen is frozen. Can't post comments. Okay, I can't post comments. Why not? I do have. Okay, I'm going to open up LinkedIn and see if I can interact with you guys there. Sorry about the frozen screen. Ah, it's Rohan. Oh no. Oh, I'm gonna try going to the live event. Hope this doesn't break anything. I'm already in the live event. I do not see where I'm able to see. I just see a comment screen is frozen. Is it still frozen? Okay, thanks, Rohan, for that. Um, let's see. All right, thanks for your patience, guys. This is my very first time using the StreamYard studio. It's fine now. All right, thanks, guys. Okay, so we've gone through these 15 minutes. I hope I've shown you. This is basically how I did it first. I guess. Okay, so I need to say that Microsoft has been changing. Um, this was a great, amazing way to put any code you wanted on a SharePoint page. You could give your users any kind of experience. Okay. Then this last July, Microsoft announced that they are getting rid of the ability to put code wherever you want on SharePoint. They are now, starting in November, they will require that all code has to be inside a web part. And then I believe what that means then is that any code that has to be in a web part then has to be in a normal SharePoint page. So I'll show you how I'm doing this now. I've got a page. No, it's Spreadsheet Killer. Okay, so I've got a page called Spreadsheet Killer. Okay, so this is at legal/site pages. All of your pages on SharePoint have to be in this directory called site pages. So you can't just create a nice URL like I did that was legal/bios. Now it has to be legal/site pages slash bios. And then any page has to end with this .aspx as well. Okay. I'm going to go into the settings here and I'm going to go into my style and I'm going to turn off this remove SharePoint banner. There we go. So now I have this SharePoint banner back. This is normally what you get at the top of a SharePoint page. And you've got an edit box here. And then inside of my web part, I had to point it to my code. Okay. So essentially, I had to create my own web part. My own web part, it's called Automate Office Work, like general app web part. It's a web part that allows you to create any app you want to now. But so Microsoft is forcing us to do this, but we have ways of still creating anything we want. Okay, so I'm gonna maybe show you an example of using this web part. So I'm gonna go to sites/test. Um, let's see what this takes me to. Okay, it takes me here. I'm going to go to the home page. If we go to new and if we go to page, there is a kind of a page. It's called an app. So let's say you don't want to just use a web part in the middle of a normal page with lots of other web parts. Let's say you only want to use a single web part on your page and have nothing else on it. So that's this option here called apps. And now I have two different web parts that I have created called my.js and AOW. It's called AOW General App. I'm going to click on that one. Come on. Yeah, I think it's my other web part. Okay, so yeah, when I choose this and I create a page, okay, it asks me for the title of my page. This is a test, and now it's asking me for the URL to my JavaScript. So I'm going to create another file, a JavaScript file that has all of my code and it's able to create my beautiful interface and it allows the user to interact with all kinds of data. For the most part, we are just interacting with SharePoint data. That is already very, very powerful. You're able to get the contents of files, the contents of lists. You can modify things. You can create new folders and new files. You can upload files from the user. You can do pretty much everything. until you get to the point where you need to do something like send an email. So when I send an email, what I do is I have a list in my SharePoint and I call it my or emails list, and it has columns. Here, I'll show you a little bit how we create columns for those that are completely new. Site contents. Maybe I even have a list called emails. Yep, here's litigation tracker emails. I go to my list and I have columns for like the to field, the subject field, the body, and you can always add more columns. Click on add column and you've got different types of data you can collect in your column. Okay. So then on my web page, I have the user, maybe they fill in some fields, they click a submit button, like they want to send an email. What it actually does is it creates a new item on my list here. And then in Power Automate, I have a flow where the trigger is when a new item is created, because that trigger completely free. You don't need any premium license to use that. So you get that trigger, it gives you all the data you need, and then your next step is just the send an email. Okay. And so that's how you send emails. You can do many other things. You can do like converting a document. Maybe you filled in a Word document. You can then use Power Automate to convert that to PDF. You can then also use Power Automate to send it out through Adobe Sign. And then you can also have another automation that is the trigger is listening for a fully signed PDF. And then once you've got that, perhaps you go and you email it to somebody. Maybe you upload it to a permanent repository in SharePoint. Perhaps you have a list of your documents that are out for signature. And so you can go and you can find that specific record and you can update the metadata. You can say it is fully signed, we're done. Okay. You can then also have another Power Automate flow that maybe you run it every day or every week, and maybe you have it look and see the documents that are still out for signing, and whoever needs to sign it, you can send them an automatic email chasing them to sign that document. So yeah, guys, this is super powerful. Is there anybody here on the chat who would like to come on and talk about anything? Do you have a specific issue? I get it if anybody is too shy to come on. And honestly, this is my first time using StreamYard too. I'm using StreamYard behind this LinkedIn event. So if anybody is able to come on, I'm not even sure how I would bring you on, honestly. But yeah, let's see if there are any comments. Nope. Nope. Okay. All right. Is there any scenario that somebody would like to see? Any general thing? I think we've got mostly lawyers on the call because that is my group of people, but we have invited everybody. Okay. Um, okay, so I guess let's just talk about a little bit. There's a very common situation that like we need to get details from people. Maybe it's a person who wants to request something. Normally, they would just send us an email, right? And your first thought might be, aha, let's create an automation that's listening for when we get a new email. And maybe let's look for keywords and let's get all the data points that they randomly typed in an unorganized way. I would say that is not the best way to work. Even if you're thinking, well, let's just get AI to look at it. Well, I would say the person who is sending you these random emails, they might not know exactly what data points need to go in. And then you might say, well, let's get an AI to instruct them or have the conversation. I would say, guys, the easiest way to do this is going to be just a form. You can create a form that will guide the conversation. Yes, you might in the future then say, well, let's have an AI guide them through the form. Well, now you have the exact conversation. You have all the data points that need to be collected. You might even constrain the answers that the person can give. Like instead of just an open box to be typing data points, you might give them checkboxes or drop down menus. And I would say this is a great way to get your data points. What I have done in the past is I created these intake forms, I call them, on SharePoint. You then point your user to the intake form. You say like, that's great that you sent me this email, which is I have no idea what you're typing in this email and you're probably missing a lot of stuff. Maybe don't tell them that, but you point them to the intake form. And then the intake form collects all the data points that you need. Then you might just go and review the data points, but you know, or you can be certain that you have all the data points that you need. Um, then next, if you are absolutely certain that you have all the data points that you need in order to go do your further processing, you might connect it to further automation. You might just put in code. Like all these data points are things that I need to go into a contract. Well, you have a contract template and you have spaces where these things need to be copied and pasted into. The code can do it for you. You can encode it in SharePoint. Um, you can do it a little bit in Power Automate. Power Automate allows you to create text areas, like text fields in your Word document, and you can fill those in. Anything more complex, something like inserting a spreadsheet into a Word document, say you have like a price list that needs to go in an appendix of your contract. Um, Power Automate doesn't have that ability natively. There might be some kind of a vendor that has added this as like a premium license kind of a thing. I found that I was able to create my own actions inside of Power Automate. So I created my own that allows me to do this. But I can also just do it inside of SharePoint also. Okay. Um, let's see. This has been great meeting with you guys. I think we're gonna wrap it up. We're gonna keep this down to a half hour. I heard from Rohan, who's on the call today. He suggested that we need to keep this very short because people have other things to do, right? Keep it down to like 15 minutes of showing and sharing, and then perhaps 15 minutes of having someone come on here, and we can have a conversation. So I'm looking forward to having these conversations with you guys. I'm going to be doing this every Friday at 4 p.m. Amsterdam time, which is normally 6 hours after US Eastern time. But for this week, we're actually an hour closer. So we're 5 hours off. Okay. So if you guys want to find me, you can find me at automateofficework.com. You can book a call with me. I'm happy to help, have a chat. I do offer services in consulting, just talking. I do offer customized solutions. I can do the building for you if you would like. And there's also education. Um, I also have a resource at legaltechready.com. It is a free resource that goes through just all of the different things that you need to do or you need to keep in mind when you are implementing legal technology. Because legal technology, unfortunately, has a reputation. 70 to 90% of legal tech implementations fail. Okay. And I believe it's because of these reasons. We don't keep these things in mind. We need to have a plan with your team, with the customer, uh, to be able to support this. How we implement this across an organization. There are people involved. Beyond the technology, we're working with people. Okay. You can also find me on LinkedIn. My name is Justin Turman, and I'm happy to interact with you guys in any way that you would like. Please send me any questions and any comments, and I'll see you guys later.